Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach. We want Mashiach now. We want the Messiah now. That's one of the tunes at the synagogue I go to. We want, the ultimate redemption. We want the Messiah to come now because this is such a flawed, painful, and broken world. And we're still waiting for these broken pieces of our lives and of this world to be fixed. So I belong to an Orthodox synagogue and believe that the Messiah will eventually come as one of the 13 foundational beliefs according to Judaism. And as Maimonides, the 13th century philosopher, says, even though he tarries, yet will we wait for him. Now, I just wish that I had a partner to do the Mashiach dance with, every Friday night. Mashiach, 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 da, 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 da. Because I can't dance. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. Seventh-day Adventists don't dance. And, I need someone to show me the moves. But she hasn't shown up yet. But I'm looking for someone who keeps the Sabbath, who keeps the Jewish dietary laws, keeps kosher. And it'd be nice if her parents liked me. And it would be nice if they even adored me and said, hey, we can stay with them until, she finishes high school. And I finished my book on eroticized rage. I'm just looking for someone to support me, while I finish my book on eroticized rage. And I have these props in my pants, and they're falling right down my pants. I should have worn a belt. Oy vey. But I'm grateful for the Orthodox Jewish community because they help out those who are less needy. And so they've been able to help out needy Jews such as myself get the psychological help that I so badly need and the antipsychotic medication. So Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and I received my Thorazine at Cedar Sinai. So when God created the world, he chose the Jews to be the master race of humanity. But it quickly became apparent that this would have very cruel consequences for the less intelligent goyim of creation. So God gave the Jews a written Torah and an oral Torah to fence them in so that they wouldn't harm the gentle Gentiles. And so Jews such as myself who live within the Torah corral, fenced in by both the written Torah and the oral Torah, 3,000 years of Jewish tradition and Jewish laws. Now, we can never hurt you Gentiles. So just know that if you ever get really mad at the Jews, that I live within the Torah corral. Now, I can never hurt you. This play is taking place within the Torah corral. So everything that happens here tonight is safe, it's beneficial, it's therapeutic, it's divinely ordained. So you're safe. I just want to create safety because sometimes people get a little freaked out by the title eroticized rage. It sounds really unsafe. So on the first day of Hanukkah, my good boss gave to me one big screen, 32 inches, 1080 pixels, and a partridge in a pear tree. So for the first time in my life, I got a big screen. And I'm so excited. It's high definition. I've never had high def before. But it's kind of haunting me because I just want to put porn on it. What else do you do with a big high def screen? I bet pornography looks amazing in high def. I've never seen porn in high def. But I've been off the porn for about 2 years now. So each day I'm staying sober in this respect. But it's just kind of sitting there on my desk, 32 inches, just haunting me. I watch my Torah lectures in high def, but it's just not quite so exciting. I watch Netflix in high def, and that's cool because I can be watching some French drama, and it's very high-minded. It's about schizophrenia. And before I can change the channel or something, some woman will just whip her top off. And I'm totally innocent. I'm not, scrolling and searching and surfing for topless women. It just popped up on my Netflix. I'm an innocent man. I can just enjoy the sight and go on with my life. Boy. I'm sure glad there are no really hot female rabbis because if I was watching my high def, Torah talks, it would be it would be really taunting because I'd be thinking like, when's she going to get naked? But it's just what happens when you watch so much pornography. It morally desensitizes you. I love the porn because when you're watching the porn, you feel like you're swept away to a better world. Like this world that we live in, it's so broken, and it's so painful, and life is so frustrating, and your dreams get dashed, and interpersonal relationships are so difficult. I mean, people are so complicated, and intimacy is so challenging that it's really nice to like just escape into the world of porn where everything is like a dream. And for me, it's like catching a wave. It's like you start watching the porn and like time can fly by and you're just catching that wave. I love to body surf, and the wave peaks and then it crashes, and if you're riding it just right, or just carry you along to shore and you just ricochet it along, and you're not in control, the wave's in control. And it feels the same way with pornography or with falling in love. It feels like a power greater than yourself has taken control of your life. I remember in 2006, I was in the San Fernando Valley on the set of Lesbian Swole Fest 7. And it was at the home of Cytherea, the goddess of gush. And this movie starred Olivia Saint and Karma, and I met this really nice girl on the set of Lesbian Swole Fest 7, and her name's Haley Rivers. And we had such a great conversation. I was writing a blog at the time on the porn industry, and I really hit it off with Haley enough that she left the industry a few months later. I started going out with Haley on a regular basis because she loved to read books. She really was a nice, sweet girl, and she got kind of chewed out by a few months in the pornography industry, but now she was out of it. And when I would get together with Haley, it was like catching that wave again. Like the sex was amazing, and she was such a sweet person, and she knew all these techniques and tricks, and it was just like mind-blowing sex. And I was just so hooked. But then a funny thing happened. The more I had sex with her, the more emotionally I fell for her. And then the more emotionally I fell for her, the more I loved her, the more her past in pornography bothered me. Like when we started out just having dinner and having sex, it didn't bother me. But now, however much I'd like to think of myself as like cool, I get emotionally involved when I have sex with someone. And as the weeks went by, like her past just started eating at me, and eventually I sought out a friend, and I described to him this one scene that she'd done. And my friend said, well, at least you know she isn't racist. Haley had always told me, there's one thing you can never do. You can never remind me of one particular scene that she did. She did it with an agent, and he required all the girls that he represented to have sex with him. And he was like an old fat guy, and she just found it so icky that she said, never remind me of that, or I'll just burst into tears. And as the weeks went by that I was seeing Haley, and this was eating away at me, like the things she'd done on camera, and one day I blogged about it, like the scene that she did with the CD agent, and that was it. She just like cut me off, and there was no more riding the wave of Haley anymore. My last girlfriend was the love of my life. And she would wear high heels. I love high heels on women. She'd wear business suits because she was an executive. And she was a little bit transgressive like me. And we would have sex everywhere. And I remember one weekend we went to the beach, and we stayed by the beach, and we went out into the water, and we kind of swam offshore out where we could not touch anymore. And I went to embrace her. And she got scared because there was this undertow. And so she like broke away from me and paddled off to shore like in a panic and got to shore. And so I was out there in the waves alone, and I just saw this big wave coming out on the horizon, and I positioned myself just right. And as it started getting closer and closer towards me, I was just paddling furiously, and I caught the wave just perfectly right at the top, and it crashed, and it took me right into shore, and she's just watching me. And she said that when I emerged out of the waves, I looked like a Greek god. One of my great memories. So just before Christmas, I marched up to this guy on my floor where I work. And we have this really frank, open relationship where we can just say anything to each other. And so I said, hey, my rabbis told me I can't wish you a Merry Christmas because we Jews, we can't legitimate Christianity. This guy got so upset. Like, he accused me of being a racist and a bigot. And for the next week or two, he'd march up and down the floor telling people about the bigoted, racist thing that I said. It just totally exploded in my face because you don't want tension and conflict at work. And so I talked about this in therapy. And I explained this to my therapist, and I said, I've got to admit, I was feeling a little bit of hostility, and I just kind of wanted to vent. But this guy, he was not the real target for my hostility. I think it's probably really aimed at my preacher daddy. My father, the Seventh-day Adventist minister, the Christian evangelist. And I did this a lot. I kind of just vent on people this free-floating anxiety, anger, rage that I have. And it just comes out at all these inopportune times. And it's holding me back in my work life. It's holding me back in my personal life. It's holding me back in period. And my therapist said, well, why don't you express your rage directly at your father? And that was really daunting to me because I've never expressed rage at my father in my life. In fact, I've never yelled at anyone since 8th grade when some kid grounded out denying me an at-bat and I started calling him a faggot. That was our term of derision in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade when I came to America. And I was so embarrassed by what I did because the woman that I was staying with at the time, because my parents were gone, she was right there and I didn't know it. And at home, I was always this nice, gentle kid. And then suddenly I was screaming faggot. And she was right there seeing this. And this was not a side of myself that I wanted to show to the adults. And so I resolved, okay, never again, don't lose my temper. Really bad things come out. But when I don't express my rage directly, I kind of express it indirectly through blogging. I have this rage at anyone who abuses religious authority, or I think they're abusing religious authority. I just find myself, going after them very aggressively. Now, frequently that's doing good. I'm exposing child molesters and predatory rabbis and rabbis who take advantage of innocent people. But sometimes I go after people whose cases are more complicated. And my rage is really at my dad. So my therapist said, well, next week, let's try something. You willing to try this? Let's have an empty chair. And you can just yell at your dad. I said, okay, I'll try it. The prospect's kind of frightening because my dad to me is like God. I have the same relationship with my father that I have with God, which is pretty much none at all. Like my father, when I was growing up, he just seemed all-powerful and all-knowing, and when I would commit sins, he'd find them out and he'd punish me. My father would, like God, reward and punish. I've never had open conflict with him in my life. We've always had a kind of amiable relationship, though it's not being close, and he's certainly been devastated by many of the things I've done since I became an adult, but he's not yelled at me because he knew it wouldn't do any good. I was an adult. So I come back to therapy the next week, prepared to confront this empty chair, and my therapist changes her mind. She says, tell me about all the ways that you want to emulate your father. Tell me about all the ways that you like your father. So I said, well, I admire that he's a scholar. I admire that he dedicates his life to learning. I admire that he dedicates his life to God. I admire that he's a really righteous guy. I've never seen my father do anything unethical. My father's like lived his life on a very high moral plane. And I respect that because supposedly I'm all about God-based ethics. As a convert to Orthodox Judaism, like this is what I should be about, and my father is a more ethical person than me. So I never got to yell at him. She kind of shelved that idea. So I've been thinking in the past few weeks, what would I yell at him about? And I'm not capable of yelling at him. And I just spent all day today watching videos of my father. There are like 100 videos of Desmond Ford on YouTube. And I'm watching this very eloquent, moving, charismatic, powerful preacher. When you believe that you're doing God's work, it gives you real power. And my father has just tapped into that power. And so I'm looking at this preacher man, and I'm looking at him mesmerize hundreds of people. And I'm watching him do an altar call. And let me see if I can imitate my father. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Sinner, if you want to get right with God tonight, if you want to repair your broken relationship with the Almighty, the Creator of heaven and earth, don't try to climb your way to heaven up the shaking sides of Mount Sinai. Salvation is a free gift, given freely to all who will accept it. All you have to do is reach out your hand and accept the free gift of salvation. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. So if you would like to commit your life to God tonight, if you would like to recommit your life to the Almighty, I'd like you to come on down and to say a prayer with me. There are people here who will pray with you. Lord, we know how much we need you. We know that you sent your Son to die on a cross so that we could be forgiven our sins. We know that you want us to have joy everlasting. Lord, we know that you want us to be with you in heaven. And we know that you sent your Son to die on our behalf. And Lord, we are so grateful and we thank you tonight. Amen. So I'm watching my dad, and he's just so very moving. I'm not a Christian. I converted to Judaism, so I'm not swayed by the arguments he makes, but I'm just impressed by the eloquence with which he delivers them, particularly as I have to get up on stage tonight for the first time and debut my show, Eroticized Rage. I'm like trying to pick up some public speaking tips from my father. And I have a really hard time learning from my father because he's my father, and I have all these blocks to relating to him. But I'm looking at him, and there's just so much like worry and unhappiness and tension and pain. It's just like flowing out of his pores, and it's just like written across his face. And he's speaking, the only people who move the world are those who the world cannot move. The people who know the unspeakable joy of the apostolic gospel. And I'm seeing this man speaking about, joy everlasting, true happiness, peace of mind, and I just see the worry and the tension and the fear and the resentment and the disappointment just like written across his face, and I'm thinking like, what do these people not get? There are like thousands of people who are absolutely mesmerized by my father's preaching, but I look at his preaching and I see this like very hurt, wounded man who's like filled with worry and concern. And then I think I realize that people relate to that. He's like the wounded healer, to quote my writing teacher, Terry Silverman. And so people relate to someone who's like so broken and so hurting, who has embraced God and this evangelical Christian ministry and is trying to show people the way to a better life, even though he can't get very far towards it himself. So Monday night in therapy, I'm just like ripping my nails to shreds. I like to dig in with my right thumbnail into my fingers and just like dig into the nail and just start tearing it when I feel just too much tension. It's a bad habit that I gave up in high school, But it was coming back to me Monday night when I started talking about my father. I've had about 8 years of psychotherapy. And for 7.5 of those years, I didn't really want to talk about my upbringing. I thought I should concentrate on what's going on now. I wanted to talk about all the girls I was banging and all the synagogues that were rejecting me, and my very tumultuous life, kind of careening from crisis to crisis. But last few months, I thought maybe I should go back and I kind of re-examine my relationship with my parents, because I can see how it's poisoning my life today. So I'm like sitting there kind of ripping my nails, and my therapist says to me, okay, stop. I just want you to sit there and kind of just take this in for a minute. Your father chose his career over you. Your father chose his religion over you. Your father chose looking after his dying wife over you. Your father chose your stepmother over you. Your father chose his work over your best interests. Your father sometimes pawned you off to other people to take care of because he didn't want to take care of you because he was so committed to his work. How does that make you feel? And I said, well, I feel some tinglings of anger, but only tinglings. And she says, well, that's good. At least you're getting in touch with something. I said, but I don't really feel much because my father's dead to me. And I couldn't believe I said that. I just said that my father was dead to me, and he was like a totally righteous man. Like, he never did anything like really bad to me. Like, he lived his life by very high moral principles, and I find myself saying he's dead to me. And my therapist says, so your real life father is too upsetting and painful for you to deal with, so you have to make him dead to have him in your life at all? And so, what would I feel if I was standing there in the cemetery watching my father's casket lowered into the ground? My father's 84 years old. He just turned 84 on Saturday. And this is a terrible sounding thing to say, but I feel relief. I just feel relief. And then I start thinking about 2 friends of mine who died, and my first instinct upon hearing the news was relief. Now, they were good friends of mine, Kathy Seid and Mark Kramer, 2 writers. But they were very difficult, challenging people. And Kathy had this long illness. But they were important to me, but I felt relief when I found out they had died. And so I was trying to figure out, why would I feel relief when I hear that my father dies? And then I started thinking, well, I feel relief because I don't have to try to work on my relationship with him anymore. It's like the easy way out. It's like the coward's way out. It's like, oh, it's gone. I don't have to deal. And then I kept going deeper, and I realized I just don't want to look in that mirror anymore. Because my father is so much like me. He is so alike. And it's like I'm looking at so much of myself when I look at my father, and I just want to avoid that. I guess I kind of want to. It's not so much my father that I'm fleeing from. It's myself, or parts of myself that I haven't fully dealt with or reconciled. So this is the only thing I have left of my mother, really. It's her book, Fireside Stories. It's a book of Christian inspirational stories for children. And on my first birthday, my mother started vomiting very severely, and she was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer. So over the next 3 years, she kind of wasted away to about 60 pounds on a 5-foot body, and she died very painfully just before I turned 4. And I only have one memory of my mother Gwen, and that's her preparing and serving me scrambled eggs. And my sitting at the table, and she kind of putting these yellow eggs on a plate before me, and they were delicious. And for all of my childhood, scrambled eggs was my favorite food in the world until I got to UCLA. And I got some bad scrambled eggs in the Reba Hall cafeteria, and it just like totally ended that that favorite food. But I kind of poured through this book, like looking for messages from my mother. Now, I think that she would have like left me a note or something to read when I turned 18. My mother did care for me very deeply. She had this conviction when she was carrying me in her belly. She would tell my dad, this one's going to do something special for God. And I got told that a lot as a kid, and I became convinced that I was a man of destiny. But, I read through this book, and it's just like pedestrian children's stories. It's like if there was some great writing in here, I could like do something with it, but it's all about Christ and Christianity and Christian inspiration, and I'm now an Orthodox Jew, and so I go through this book and I can't find anything. It's just this old 44-year-old book, came out in 1968 when I was 2 years old. There's one story, the first story, that kind of speaks to me a little bit. It's called Wan Ping the Unwanted. Wan Ping was this little girl who grew up in Taiwan, and her family didn't want her because they had too many girls already. So they sold her into slavery, and she worked as a slave, and eventually she was adopted by these Christian missionaries who got her educated, and she got a degree as a nurse, and she married a doctor, and then she went back to the mountains where she grew up. And so the kid that nobody wanted became the nurse that everyone loved. And I dig the koala bear on the cover because he looks like he's found his place in the world. And the pause that refreshes. So I want to give my father's perspective. So I've been giving mine. In January 28, 1999, there was this weekly publication in Los Angeles. It was like the LA Weekly. It was a competitor to the LA Weekly. It was called New Times LA. And it had a cover story on me. And the journalist Peter Gilstrap called out my father. And I quote, "You need to understand Luke's background to understand the foolish things that he's doing," offers Dr. Ford. He was separated from his mother when she was declared to be a terminal patient of cancer when he was 12 months old, so he had a series of nannies for a number of years. Each time he'd get his affection wrapped around one, things would change. He'd have another person looking after him. This went on until I remarried. By that time, he was something of a psychological case, as he'd been deprived over and over. Brutal honesty seems to run in the Ford family. Quotes, "He is narcissistic. He's just not acting sanely because he's not well. And the doctor has an explanation for Luke's embracing of Judaism as well. He wants to be someone in his own right. He's not really behaving according to the ethics of Judaism at all. It's only a front. Still, it's his son's involvement in porn that concerns the doctor the most. I'm afraid he'll be shot," he says. "He's doing damage to people who have no scruples." When informed of this conversation, the son's only comment is, "Oh, my poor father." Now I just want to offer a brief objective perspective, I believe, on my father and I from a Seventh-day Adventist Bible scholar. He writes to me, "Your father knows too much for me to tell him anything, including about you. It will never happen. You write in the style of your father. Like him, you tie together long quotes with rather poor segues. Knowing too much, summarizing too fast, summing up too quickly is a weakness he has. It is a way that you and he are terrifically alike. You enjoy controversy and driving people nuts way too much. Part of what makes you ill at ease is this approach toward the outside world as the enemy to be debunked. And then Hollywood screenwriter Robert J. Averick, who wrote the movie Body Double, which is about the porn industry. He also wrote A Stranger Among Us, which is about Orthodox Judaism. He wrote the foreword to my 2004 book, Yesterday's News, Tomorrow Inside American Journalism. He writes, "Betrayal fascinates Luke Ford. It is his life. Luke betrayed his father, a prominent Seventh-day Adventist minister, when Luke converted to Judaism. Luke betrayed his second father when he sacrificed his friendship with Dennis Prager to work on an unauthorized biography of his hero. And Luke betrayed Judaism when he became LukeFord.com, the preeminent journalist covering LA's sordid, mob-infested porn industry. Luke betrayed his Orthodox synagogue when he lied about his work and told the rabbi that he was a freelance journalist who writes about crime for a Japanese magazine." I did kind of write about crime a couple of times for a Japanese magazine, but it wasn't really my main thing. So when my mother died, my dad was chased by all these women because he was like a big shot in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And some of these women would tell him, like, I had a vision that we would get married. My father would say, well, if that was true, I would have had a vision too, and I haven't. But my mother, Gwen, had told my father that he should marry his secretary, Jill. And so the church also pressured my father to get married because it was a distraction to him to have all these women chasing him. My father was the chair of the religion department at Avondale College, which is a Seventh-day Adventist college 2 hours drive north of Sydney. So a few months after my mother died, my dad married his secretary, Jill, and I regard her as my mother because that's what she's been since I was 4 years old. And I would cling to my mother, Jill, when I was a little boy, and I'd say, I'm a lucky boy. Most boys have only one mother. I've had lots, but I don't want any more. There was a problem, though. When my mother got married, she went on the pill, and the pill just did really wacky things with her hormones. So for the next 14 years, she was insane 2 weeks out of the month. Like the 2 weeks before her period, she just had the worst premenstrual syndrome. She was like suicidal. You know, she was desperate. She was angry. She was depressed. She wouldn't come out of her room. Nobody knew what to do, and that began like a long journey to all these doctors and psychiatrists. My father had this very loving marriage in his first marriage, but then his wife died. But then married a very nice woman, second time, Jill, my stepmother, but the pill triggered something, and she was just insane 2 weeks of the month, and she would slap me, and I'd go flying, and my dad would try to protect me the best he could, but he was getting his second PhD, did the first one in rhetoric, this one was in New Testament studies, and my home was just a horror show for 14 years until my mother got the help that she needed, and so since I've been 18, my mother's been sane, meaning Jill, 4 weeks out of the month. You know, she's been great once she got hormone replacement therapy that just like really did the trick for her. But for the 14 years that I was growing up, it was just horrific. And because of the horror, I never really saw any love between my father and my stepmother. There may well have been love there. I'm not claiming that I'm the objective source of all wisdom. There are many different types of relationships. Some relationships are based around causes, and my father had his evangelical Christian cause of saving souls for Jesus and showing people the way to heaven. And my mother assisted him with that, meaning Jill. She assisted him with his learning German and French so that he could get his second PhD. She wrote a book that became very well known in Seventh-day Adventist circles, but I doubt you've heard of it. It's called The Soteriological Implications of the Human Nature of Christ. Does anyone here know what soteriological means? It has to do with the nature of salvation. So it means, what does it mean for your salvation that Jesus Christ had a human nature? So she's a very smart woman. She's a great writer, but she was nuts 2 weeks out of the month. And so I grew up with all these different mothers, and I grew up with what is called the intermittent attachment to the mother. That means some days the mother is attuned to you. Like if you're upset, they notice you're upset. If you're happy, they notice you're happy. But other days she was just raging out of control, ignoring me or slapping me, or it was just horrific. So I never knew when I went to my mother, meaning the various mothers who looked after me in my first few years, and then my stepmother, I never knew whether I'd get a slap or a hug. And so people who grow up with this intermittent style of attaching, they regard the outside world as a scary place. And they tend to carry on this very same attachment style into their lives. And I've had that too. I've had that kind of fear of genuine bonding with another person. People who get this intermittent mothering, they tend to become either workaholics or addicts. And they're very anxious people because home was not a safe place. My father got this very same mothering style. My father's mother was a sex and love addict. She would drag my father and his brother around Australia as she chased various men, as she chased various romantic sexual highs. And my dad's father, he was emotionally unavailable. He wasn't capable of dealing with emotions. So it's so interesting that my father and I both had the same kind of parenting. Like my father's not really emotionally available because he was never taught how to deal with emotions, so he avoids emotions. And people who grow up with a father who's not emotionally available, they tend to feel worthless because the father is never able to bond with them because the father's not emotionally available. So I'm kind of like carrying on my father's life. Has anyone in here read the book Passionate Marriage or heard of the book Passionate Marriage? It's about something called differentiation. Differentiation means it's your ability to hold on to what's important to you while you try to stay in relationship with the people who are important to you. It's very easy to just pursue what you want and say, screw everyone else. And it's very easy to sacrifice what you want for the sake of staying in attachment to the people who are important to you. But true maturity is trying to stay in relationship to the people who are important to you while also staying true to what's important to you. And so what happens when the anxiety starts welling up, a person with a low level of differentiation will either split from the relationship, any type of relationship, they will get out of it, or they will surrender what's important to them. So levels of differentiation, which are really levels of emotional maturity, tend to run pretty much the same throughout families. So if you think you're so much more mature than your father or your sibling, you're probably deluded. You're all probably in the same boat. We can only have relationships with people who are on the same level of emotional maturity as we are. So if you're dating someone and you think, oh, she's an alcoholic, she's a horror show, she's this and she's that, and you're going around telling everyone about how horrible your girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend is, she's a mirror back to you. You can only spend time, intimate time with people who are on that same level of maturity. And the level of differentiation tends to stay pretty constant from generation to generation. So the things that I struggle with are very similar to the things my father struggles with, to very similar things to his father and his father. And it's very difficult to grow your level of differentiation. It takes very hard work, a lot of therapy, a lot of really hard work to be able to stay true to your values. Because like with my father, I just want to flee and do my own thing. Instead of like working on trying to relate to him or relate to anyone who I find troubling, I have this low level of emotional maturity. I just like cut and run. And so it makes for a very lonely life. I was suicidal much of my youth. And I allowed myself to think about suicide because I thought it was the one thing that I could do that would cause my parents the most pain. And it's not like they were terrible parents. Like they totally did the best they could. They raised me with God and religion and a community. But I just had so much rage and anger, and they were the closest people to me. So I wanted to hurt them. And I thought if I kill myself, that would just be devastating to them. And it'd be devastating to my teacher who treated me badly. And it'd be devastating to those other kids. I remember Gavin Brown in second grade. He did not invite me to his birthday party. And I still remember that. I was so keen. And it was because I was an obnoxious kid. It wasn't because I was this righteous person, a figure of light. It was because I was obnoxious. And I became fascinated with fire. I learned how you'd wrap matches in tinder, and then you'd like step on them, and it'd make a boom if you did it right. And then, like, forest fires were the worst thing where I grew up. We were in the country, and I heard a lot of things about the horror of forest fires and setting fires. So when I was about 7 or 8, I took some matches and I went into the field of dry grass outside our home, and I lit it alight, and then I ran off. Luckily, the neighbors saw the fire and came out and put it out. And when I told my best friend Wayne what I'd done, he said, I'm going to tell on you if you ever do that again. So I didn't do it again. But I did play with matches inside the home and burnt a hole in the tablecloth and got a really good spanking from my father for doing that. I remember I'd get the mini sermon first, and then I'd have to get down on my knees, then I'd have to pull down my pants. I'd be like this, and my dad would say, I'm going to hit you longer and harder if you cry. And now I'm going to have to hit you so hard that you're not going to have to sit down for a week. And then he'd just like wail away. Which I thoroughly deserved because I was a menace. I was playing with matches inside the house. I played with matches outside the house. And I only got a handful, maybe 4 spankings from my dad, but they're very indelibly etched in my mind. So, like, I understand people who light fires, and I understand people who like create computer viruses, because we want to make the outside world match the anger and rage and fire that we feel inside. And we want to feel powerful. Like when you light a fire, you're affecting lives. You could affect hundreds of lives. You're kind of deciding who will live, who will die. And it's like this sick rush of power and significance. You want to feel important. You feel insignificant. You feel horrible about yourself. And people who are unable to connect with others are going to feel horrible about themselves. And so you just kind of lash out. And so I understand Palestinian suicide bombers. If I'd been brought up in the occupied territories, the Gaza Strip, I might well have become a Palestinian suicide bomber because they promise you that you'll be cool. You tie on bombs and blow yourself up. And so it's like, wow, I'll be cool, and I'll get virgins in heaven, and my family will be given like honor in the community. Like I'm really susceptible to cults. Like anyone who wants to like embrace me, take me in and say, yay, Luke, no, I'll give them everything. I found a way out of my misery. I remember one day in 4th grade, I'm at the home of my best friend Wayne. And he goes into the trailer of his oldest brother Brian and comes out with these girly magazines. And we take them out back and we lie down among the tobacco leaves and we just open them up, and it was just so magnificent. It was like totally naked women, and they were like so beautiful. Like all the women I knew, they hid the good stuff. But now the good stuff was out there. I mean, there was breasts and there was like unbelievable pubic hair, and I just loved the way they would pose. Like the look, like these girls truly understood me. I mean, I could see on their faces they understood me. They'd pout a little bit, or they'd wink, or they'd stick one finger like this, or they kind of lean over and make their breasts really big, or they just kind of lie back and look all passive, or they just like slide a finger in and they look really stirred up, or they'd be closing their eyes, imagining the ecstasy that they could have if I jumped on top of them right then. And, my pulse was racing, and my blood was circulating, and I was flushing bright red, and, this was awesome. This was, the greatest thing in the world. Because I'd seen, even though I lived in a Seventh-day Adventist community, only about 25% of the community was Seventh-day Adventist. Even though I had no non-Adventist friends, there were non-Adventists in the community, and I would see them swimming in the creek down below our house, and the girls would wear bikinis. And now I got to see, what was underneath the bikinis. In real life, I kind of see things get wedged up inside of them, but now there were no more secrets. I had eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I loved it. And I studied these magazines the way my dad studied the sacred text. My dad loved the Bible. He wanted to know, God's will for our lives. I just wanted to know about girls, because girls in my school they had no interest in sex. It was weird. I entered school in second grade, so I was age 8, because the founding prophet of my church, Ellen G. White, said that you should hold kids until later before you send them to school. So for my first few years, I was wandering in the bush outside of our home, and with a tomahawk, and I'd chop down trees, and I'd tell myself stories that I was a great man, I was a general leading troops into battle. I was leading settlers, into the west and watching out for the Indians, and I knew I'd make a great general or leader because I had no feelings. I knew I could be absolutely ruthless. And I'd just sit there on a log with my tomahawk, and I'd just tell myself stories and lose myself in fantasy. But around age 8 or 9, my fantasy started changing. It wasn't quite so political and military anymore. It started getting really sexual. But the girls weren't interested, so what to do? So many of my classmates started buggering each other. They'd go into the dunny, which is Australian for the outside toilet. Many Australians then had toilets outside, and sometimes snakes would live in there, and you'd sit on the dunny, and the snake would rise up and bite you on the ass. And so some of my friends would go into the dunnies, and they'd bugger each other. They'd also have sex with animals, because we're in a rural community. And there was this one popular guy who was a grade above me. And I remember we went out, I stole some money from my parents, and I bought lots of candy, and we went for a long walk, out into the bush, and no one was around. And I knew he was having sex. And I was really curious. And so he said he'd have sex with me. So we kind of went off the road into these bushes. And I said, well, you pull down your pants, and I'll penetrate you. And then I got chicken at the last moment. And then I said, well, let's swap. And then I pulled down my pants, and then I got chicken at the last moment. It's I just didn't quite cross over. I said, no animals. I'm really horny, but I'm not going to have sex with any animals. And I said, I'm not going to have any sex with any boys. No animals, no boys. I have very high standards. Fifth grade, first time that a girl pays attention to me. There's this chubby girl in my class, and she really likes me. And I don't know what to do. So I take tacks, and I put them with the sharp side up. I put them on her chair. And she comes over and sits down and yelps, and there's blood, and she's in pain, and everyone knew what I did. And I was kind of frightened by what I'd done. And I've never done it again since. I'm kind of righteous like my dad. I no longer put tacks on people's chairs. And then another time she got a little too close to me, so I started kicking her, and she started crying. And she said to me through her tears, one day you will know what it's like to love someone who kicks you. She was right. I think she cursed me. My father was a very controversial Christian evangelist and theologian, unlike his mild-mannered son. And And so the Seventh-day Adventist Church thought that if they transferred him from the comparatively small pond of Australian Adventism to the United States, that he wouldn't cause so much trouble. So in May of 1977, it's like halfway through 5th grade, we moved to Pacific Union College in the Napa Valley, a Seventh-day Adventist college. And I entered 6th grade that September, and it was awesome because there were no school uniforms in America, and the teachers didn't hit you. Like, the teachers used to wail on me. They'd, like, break rulers over my hand. They'd hit me so hard in Australia. Also, in Australia, none of the kids wore deodorant. But in America, like, people smell great. It's, like, amazing. I love America. And in Australia, people are really brutally honest in the things they say. But in America, people were, like, really nice. And they were much more psychological. And so everyone started saying that I was insecure. Like, no one in Australia had called me insecure. And I was just as insecure as in Australia as I was when I came to America. But America had that therapeutic language. And makeup. In Australian private school, girls are forbidden from wearing makeup. But in America, the girls wore makeup. Best of all, they used lip smacker. I just love lip smacker. They would just glide on this lip gloss. Came in strawberry, vanilla, just like these amazing flavors, and they just like swipe it across their lips, and their lips would become shiny, and they'd smell of fruit. And the most beautiful girl in the class kind of looked like Jacqueline Smith from Charlie's Angels, kind of like a combination of Jacqueline Smith, Kate Jackson, and Jane Seymour, like that great brunette beauty. And I'm new in the school, and what's awesome about this is that my place in the social pecking order isn't set yet. They don't know I'm a loser. Because there's not Facebook, there's not the internet yet. So what do I mean by social pecking order? What do I mean by social status? It's, do people want to be around you? Like, do people come to your one-man place? So if no one wants to be around you, you might as well die. I mean, social isolation is like just another word for death. But if you walk into a room and people want to talk to you and be around you, that's the most amazing thing ever. So they don't know I'm a loser. And Cindy doesn't know I'm a loser. Kate Jackson Beauty. So early on in 6th grade, she walks by my desk and she drops a note. No one's ever dropped a note on my desk before. And my heart starts thumping, thumping, thumping. And this is the greatest moment of my life. This is the absolute high of my life, because the most beautiful girl has dropped a note on my desk, and the note says, "Will you go with me?" And I am flooded. I'm just flooded with emotion, because it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. But like a car that's flooded won't start, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. And then the next day I just started teasing her. Unmercifully, publicly, humiliating her. And I've got to understand why I did this, because like never again has the most beautiful girl in the class wanted to go with me. And I think it was because I just had no model for love. Like, my parents had this horror show due to my stepmother's illness and my dad's neglectful upbringing. And so I didn't know how to relate to people. Like, my dad was a martyr. Like, he deliberately martyred himself for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what he gave everything for, and he kind of let everyone know that he gave everything for the gospel, and he was a martyr. And the whole ethos, the whole central story of Christianity is that God came to earth, took human form, and martyred himself on a cross to save humanity from sin. I remember one of the first films that I saw that I remember so distinctly is the 1966 Oscar winner, Man for All Seasons, which is about Sir Thomas More, who was like a martyr for his beliefs, that the king shouldn't get a divorce in England in the 16th century. So martyrdom seemed like at the very center of the religion I was raised in, and due to the neglectful upbringing that my father had, instead of losing himself in addiction and alcoholism like his brother, he lost himself in God, which was healthier. But I had no model for dealing with emotions. My father was couldn't relate to me emotionally, and my mother was like out of control emotionally, so that it was frightening. Like my dad was gone a lot of the time preaching, and so I was like the man of the house. And my stepmother would often say to me, "You've saved my bacon." Like on Friday nights, we kind of get into bed together. Nothing improper happened, but I just like kind of cling to her and get her to tell me stories about her life. And I mean, this carried on until I was 15. It was like emotional incest because my dad was gone. My dad was not capable of loving my mother because she was so troubled by her illness and because of his own upbringing. So my mother loved me and I loved her. But she told me too much. It was like too much for me to handle. On the one hand, I felt proud about being the man of the house. But on the other hand, she just had so much need. She was like this whirlpool of need that it frightened me. And my dad would tell me, well, all women are like that. All women get depressed before their periods. All women get violent before their periods. It's just how women are. You can't just like drill a hole in the watermelon to see if she's sweet. If I could just have one do-over in my life, it would be that note from Cindy Jackson. It's like I imagine, what would I say to her if I could do it over? It would be, hey, yes, I've never done this before. You're my first girl. I don't know how to do this. Can you show me? I really like you, and you'll know it was the most exciting thing that's happened to me my whole life. I adore you. But I'm kind of frightened by everything the intensity of all of this. I'm scared. Will you help me? Cindy left our community after 6th grade. I have no idea what she's doing now. I ask people on Facebook, I have no idea. I just love to know what she's doing now. So in the summer of 7th grade, I started hanging out at Pacific Union College pool, and with this kind of amiable blonde Jeannie. She's not the most beautiful girl in the class, but she's very nice. And we play these keep-away games. And so the boys against the girls, and we each have like a partner, and we kind of throw the ball back and forth and try to keep it from the other. And it's just all an excuse so that you can touch each other. But my touch is really hard. It's really, like, I really tackle her and dunk her under the water. And the other guys tell me, take it easy. This is just an excuse to put your arms around her. But I don't know how to touch because most of the touch that I've received has been violence. And my father is so tense, so anxious, because he had the same sort of mothering style that I talked about. So he has so much anxiety and tension, and when you're touched by someone who's tense, it's very unpleasant. So I was like relieved when I was about age 7. He said I was too old to kiss goodnight anymore. I was relieved because his touch is so unpleasant. My father hates to be touched, and so I didn't know how to touch. In 1980, my father is kicked out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's a dispute over the heavenly sanctuary doctrine. The church said that in 1844, Jesus moved from the holy to the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary to begin the final work of judging the saints just before coming to earth. Seventh-day Adventist, Advent means the soon coming of Jesus Christ. So they were fighting over where Jesus was traveling in 1844. That was like the theological dispute. What it really was about, in my opinion, was nothing to do with theology, but my father, like myself, grew very increasingly frustrated with the relationship between himself and the church, and this was just how he lashed out, because of his level of differentiation, he could not stay in this frustrating relationship any longer. And so he wanted to say his piece and be free. And we were now out of the church, and until this point, everybody who'd been my friend had been a Seventh-day Adventist, and we're now out of the church, and we're kind of out in the cold world. We moved to Auburn, California, which is 45 minutes drive north of Sacramento. And my father gets a lot of press. He's like interviewed in Time magazine, the Los Angeles Times. And he tells people that we now belong to the mythical the Invisible Church of Jesus Christ. Now, this Invisible Church of Jesus Christ, this mythical church, does not have a big youth program. And so we just kind of have a little gathering of disaffected ex-Adventists. And one couple that comes there is looking after about 40 retarded girls. Retarded girls just love me. I don't know. There's something about like missing a chromosome that just girls with missing chromosomes or things that are retarded, they just adore me. But I was not interested in a relationship with a retarded girl. Summer of So the good thing about when we were traveling a lot is I spent a lot of time at newsstands. And I'd see a lot of men like looking at Playboy. And I was afraid to look at Playboy. Because the one time that I'd looked at these girly magazines, we'd been caught by a mother. And I was so scared of what would happen to me. I didn't want to be punished. And I was so scared by my attraction for this material. And I knew it would lead me away from God. And so I swore I wouldn't look at naked photos anymore. I just swore off it. But when I was in the newsstand looking at Sports Illustrated, like there'd be men around me in airports, they'd be looking at Playboy and Penthouse, and I couldn't help seeing like just a glance. I was so scared of being punished by my parents, I didn't pursue it. My parents caught me in a lot of lies, which I told to avoid getting punished, and so they gave me this punishment of every day I had to read 40 pages of some dense Christian work of apologetics. Apologetics is arguing for the truth of your particular religion. So for years, every day, 6 days a week, I'd have to read 30 to 40 pages of some dense work and then type a one-page summary of what I read to prove that I'd learned it. So I learned all the arguments for the truth of Christianity, and I emotionally just learned how much I hated it. Because it was like just stuck down my throat. I felt like it was like I was just fodder for Christ. And I just had this rage. When my father got kicked out of the church, we bought a television for the first time. Even though my television watching was limited to about an hour a day, like I saw like really beautiful women on TV, just the women reading the news or on a sitcom or on a movie or the cheerleaders in football. And now that we were out of the church, out of the Seventh-day Adventist community, like television became like the ultimate real in my life. Like this was what I wanted. This was like the fantasy. These were like the breadcrumbs leading me to a better life where I could be with sexy women like I see on TV. Because when I see those women, all my pain disappears. Like all my problems and frustrations and anger, it just goes, and all I want is to be with sexy women. Early 1982, I go with my parents back to Australia for my sister's wedding. And that's the first time that I ever pick up a Playboy on my own since 4th grade. And it's the April issue. And there's an interview with Bear Ed Koch. Not sure if I read that, but the centerfold is Linda Reese Vaughn. She's like 5 foot tall, like a real spinner. Just like a little girl, and she loves horse riding, and a real equestrian, and has on the back of the centerfold it has these photos of her when she was a little girl, and now she's like this little sex pot. And I'm like really excited about it. And every time I can get away during that 2-week trip to Australia, I get to a newsstand and like get your Playboy and Penthouse, and it makes me high. I feel high. It's just like I'm in a better world. It's like this is heaven. Like for my dad, heaven is being with Jesus. For me, heaven is being with Linda Reese Vaughn. Summer of 1982, I go back to Pacific Union College, stay with friends, and it's the first time I fall in love with a girl who loves me back. And her name is Rainey. She was always a grade below me when I was at Pacific Union College Elementary School. from 6th through 8th grade, but I didn't really pay attention to her. But now I was working in the camp with the kids. I was like a summer camp counselor, and she worked in custodial. And she was just adorable. She wasn't theologically sophisticated, so all the things that were talked about in my home were of no interest to her. She kind of had this kind of rolling booty. She was like round. She wasn't fat, but she just had a lot of roundness to her. And I was like tall and skinny, and I just kind of felt absorbed in her attention, in her smile. She was just, she'd pull these chipmunk cheeks underwater when we were at the pool, and someday she let me put my arm around her, and I got to rub suntan lotion in her skin. And we never talked about a relationship or love or what we had, but we'd see each other every day at work, and then a couple of days a week she'd come to the pool and we'd hang out. And then came the sad day in August when my mother came to pick me up, and I never kissed her that first summer. I just said goodbye and had to go home. And even though it was 100 degrees out, it was like winter in my heart, and I'd write to Rainey. And whenever I could, I'd go back to Pacific Union College and see her spend a weekend. One Sabbath when I'm back there, she talks about she's going to a concert like Journey that night with a guy from a college guy. And I get so hurt that I stopped writing to her. I just completely cut her off. I don't tell her what I'm feeling. I don't tell her about my hurt and jealousy. I just cut her off. And then I discovered masturbation. Starting junior year of high school, my parents are gone, I'm staying with friends. I go to the secondhand bookstore, and I buy this pornographic novel. And I take it home to where I'm staying, and no one else is there, and I'm sitting in the living room, and I'm reading this novel, and I'm pressing on myself, and I'm pressing on myself, and I'm feeling this tension growing and growing and growing, and then suddenly, this sticky, gray, mucusy goo just shoots out all over my leg, all over the couch, all on the floor. It must have shot 10 feet. It was whoo! And I was scared to death. I was scared to death. My dad, told me not to touch myself down there. Just a little bit when you wash yourself in the shower, and that's it. And, he'd warned me about this. Now, it has happened, and I am so appalled and ashamed, and all the cleaning up. There's so much of it. It's just it's everywhere. It just goes on and on and on. And I swear, I will never do this again. But the next day, I'm right back at it. And the problem is, I've never talked about it with anyone, and so I don't really know how to do it. So I don't know how I got this idea, but I'd heard if you rub two sticks together, you can create fire. So I'm just rubbing myself like this and rubbing the skin off. And I'm bleeding. It's just like I'm doing a lot of damage. It took me many weeks, till I learned a gentle stroke, alternating with the left hand and the right hand. But I'm really lucky to be here today. I almost died. So, please, kids, never try to set fire to your penis. And with any addiction, I started stealing for it. I would look in the mailboxes, my parents' mailbox, looking for Playboys. And one day, I found the December 1982 issue of Playboy. It was my first time with a Playboy of my own that I could keep. I looked around, no one was there. I took it, and some playmate in a Christmas outfit on the cover, and it featured fiction by Paul Theroux and Arthur C. Clarke, and an article examining Reagan's nuclear war hawks. And then I took it into this broken down wood cabin, and I just went through every page. First just looking for the nudity, and then like kind of glancing at the articles, and then back to the nudity, like deciding which of these girls in this magazine I was going to have sex with. And the centerfold was Charlotte Kemp. I mean, this girl was stacked, totally stacked. She was the girlfriend of Gary Fensick, who was a Chicago Bears defensive back. And I really liked how she'd kind of lean over like this and lean back like this. And she'd just like close her eyes, and she was just like in total ecstasy, anticipating what I was about to do to her. And now I had something that I could go to whenever I needed to. I could get away, and there's my very own Playboy. And I started hanging out at like liquor stores and like glancing through the new issues, because one issue was not enough. And in all but one place, they didn't give me any hassle. There was one smoke shop where after about 15 minutes, they'd get rid of me. So eventually one day, when I'm a junior, I woke up the courage and I buy my first issue of Penthouse. Like, Penthouse is my favorite, because Penthouse would be fully explicit. Like, I love the pink. Just love the pink. It just like spread open there for me. And yet it'd be shot in this beautiful, gauzy, romantic way. Like, Playboy was romantic and had really hot chicks, but it had very little pink. And Hustler had lots of pink, but it was just really gross. Like, it had like 300-pound women and a lot of black women, and I'm not really into that. And High Society was good, but again, it was gross, because like the girls would like get in there and they'd like, just like really open up that canal, and I was like, it just didn't do it for me. Like, they'd have like Annie Sprinkle, and she was chubby and not attractive, and it was gross. But Penthouse was totally where it was at, and so I developed this great collection of Penthouse magazines, in particular. And I'd walk this deserted road near my house, and one day I found like this collection of like 40 magazines. And I took them into this shed, and I just like spread them out. And like I'd spend like 5 seconds on this girl, then like 10 seconds here, and like I had just like this total orgy. Like 40 different magazines. They were just all spread out before me. They were just so willing. Like, some girls were like hot to trot, and others were really haughty and disdainful. And others were just like really curious what I had packing, and they had the whole panoply of human emotion, like there. Some with the eyes closed. I understand some girls want to do it with the eyes closed, and some their eyes are wide open. It's like, whoa. And when my parents, usually I'd keep them in a old mailbox, discarded mailbox. I'd just like cover up my magazines and hide them in the woods and visit them on the way home from school. But sometimes when my parents were gone, I'd bring them all home. I'd just like spread them out on the floor, and I'd spend hours with them, and then, like I'd rub myself raw like a nut 4 times. And I feel kind of sick afterwards, but I don't know why. January 1, 1983, Penn State wins the National College Football Championship. They beat Herschel Walker and the Georgia Bulldogs. It's a Saturday night. It's a party. The Invisible Church of Jesus Christ is having a party, a youth party. And a chubby friend of mine from church comes to the party with this cute freshman girl. So I'm a junior, this cute blonde freshman girl. And she likes me. And so the 3 of us go up into a loft. And after about half an hour of talking to the blonde girl, I like lean over and kiss her. Like, we're moving fast. And as I'm about to like send my tongue right down her throat, she like slows me down, and she teaches me how to kiss. She like slows me down, she takes charge, and she like glides her lips over my bottom lip and over my top lip. And then she like nibbles on my lip. And then she sends her tongue over my lips, and then just under my lips. And then we go at it. Our tongues are just like, "Rrr." And then we come back and take a breath and just look at each other. We like make out for an hour, and a chubby friend is like, "Oh, you guys, come on." But this is the first time that I really relaxed into touch. And this is where I learned to kiss. I learned how fun it was. I was totally high. And it was completely recreational. I had just met this girl, half an hour, a minute before, and we've already dived into all out making out. And I didn't really have a desire to have a relationship with her. Her body was smoking hot, but she had a fair bit of acne. but she had glossy lips, and she knew how to kiss, and she prepped me. So next summer I go back. It's the summer of 1983, and Rainey has sent me one letter saying how hurt she is by my silence. And I run into her again, and we go for a walk. And as we cross a log over a stream in the woods at Pacific Union College, I take her in my arms and I kiss her for the first time. This is the first time I've kissed someone who loves me and I love her. And this is a whole different dimension of kissing. This is a whole different dimension of intimacy. And it's awesome. So we just start taking regular walks, and we'll stop and we'll make out, and then we'll catch our breath and just kind of look at each other. But I have to admit, I still had this rage and resentment that she'd gone out to a Journey concert with a college guy. So one day I take her home to where I'm staying, and I get her on my bed, and I start making out with her really hard. And I try to take her clothes off. She keeps saying, I'm not that kind of girl, I'm not that kind of girl. She won't let me. And then I don't talk to her anymore. Because I never told her how much hurt and jealousy I felt. I never explained to her, we never talked about why I stopped writing to her. I'd kind of taken out my anger on her by trying to rip her clothes off. And then when she wouldn't go along with it, I said, well, F you. I didn't say that out loud, but I just kind of dropped her. And she's never gotten married. And she still looks good. And she might have been all I needed. Because people with this intermittent style of attachment with their mother, they do tend to be womanizers. They do tend to be users of women and just going from woman to woman to woman. And that's what I was headed for. December 1983, I'm a senior in high school, and I ride the bus with Rochelle, who's this cute brunette sophomore. She's on the gymnastics team. We just kind of do this verbal gymnastics every morning in the bus. And one of our mutual friends sitting with us is Rob Stutzman, who goes on to be the political spokesman for Arnold Schwarzenegger during his campaign run. He's now a big political consultant. I'm the editor of my high school newspaper. Rob is the sports editor. And I really like Rochelle. So one Friday night, my family keeps the Sabbath, which goes from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night. Tell my parents I'm going to a Bible study. I go to my school, I check out a video camera, and I go along with the gymnastics team to a meet in Sacramento, and I videotape it because my school has 1 hour a day on the community access channel in Auburn, and I'm like the lead newscaster and sportscaster. I kind of like run the show. So I videotape Rochelle, and on the road back, after the meet, I kind of start getting things rowdy on the bus, and the coaches like me because I have an Australian accent, and I'm charming or something. They like me, and I try to see how much I can get away with, and then I kind of start moving down the bus looking for Rochelle. Then I get her, and I just start tickling her, just very lightly at first, and she protests. Then I get more aggressive, and then she runs away from me, and so I just run down the bus after her, tickling her, and everyone's laughing and whooping it up, and I think it's okay. And I feel this is awesome because I haven't had to ask her out on a date. I haven't had to expose myself emotionally. I just cut right to the chase. This is totally the way to deal with girls. Monday I get on the bus and Rob says she doesn't like you anymore. And that was it with Rochelle. I find out that she's going to the senior prom with the center of the basketball team, and a mutual friend says to me they had massive sex after the prom. And I'm just devastated. And I need to talk about it. So I start telling everyone I know that Rochelle had massive sex with Marky after the senior prom, and of course word gets back to her. I ask her to sign my yearbook. She writes, Luke, alias the rapist. I sure hope you had a fun year spreading rumors about me. So sorry I did not sink low enough to be the hill gal of the week. I guess I sort of ruined all your fun. I guess you're right. You didn't spread lies about me. Sure, I had massive sex with Marky. You're right. I was definitely the one that attacked you on the bus back from championships. I'll never forget how you made me a star on cable TV. All those great tapes you took and most likely edited yourself. I am really glad you had a fun time with that collection of yours. Love, your good, good friend, Rochelle. I take a year off after high school, go back to Australia, live with my brother who's an atheist. And in Christmas time, 1984, I'm making out with this really drunk girl in the bushes. And I think I'm finally going to lose my virginity. And then she leans away from me and says, I'm going to be sick. She starts vomiting and vomiting. And for some reason, she felt embarrassed by kind of all that. And I never saw her again. And definitely did not have sex with her. Not get that opportunity. So now, February 1988. I'm now almost 22 years old. And I've got this workout routine where I do 1,300 push-ups and 120 pull-ups in 30 minutes. Like, I'm in amazing shape. I've been accepted into UCLA. I think, finally I'm going to lose my virginity. I'm going to move away from home. And I'm talking with a friend out in the parking lot of my community college, Sierra Community College in Rockland. He tells me those girls in Los Angeles, they're really loose. And he does this. I'm not sure quite what he means, but I think he's saying that you could, like, put your whole fist in there. And I'm like, wow. And LA is like the home of MTV. Like, all these music videos that I love are shot in LA, and the women just look amazing. So I'm so looking forward to university. And boom, like, life as I know it ends. I get sick with what seems like the flu, but it doesn't go away. And it lasts month after month, and I go to doctors and no one knows what's wrong. I kind of drag myself off to UCLA, hoping the change of environment will help me. And after about a year of this illness, I finally get the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. And I have to spend about 18 hours a day in bed. I'm only able to finish one class each quarter. I figure, well, if I'm going to spend all my time in bed, I might as well lose my virginity. And there's this really hot Korean girl. It's like totally full rack, like the D rack. And she's just tiny. She's like 5'2", and she's got a D rack, and she's athletic. And when she smiles, her eyes just disappear in slits. And she comes from Korea, so she's not like debauched like American girls. She's a Christian. And I know there's something magnificent about my upbringing, even though at this point I'm an atheistic communist, because I think that will get me laid. And I so want to have sex with her because she's a Christian, and I want to screw Christianity. She represents Christianity to me. She like represents the good things about my upbringing. I want to like get right up in there, but she's not interested. So I have to settle for this Chinese girl who's an atheist and who only has A-cup breasts, but she's willing. And she even reads this kind of pornographic novel that I'm working on, and she points out the parts that are anatomically not possible. I haven't had sex yet, but I'm writing all these detailed sex scenes kind of out of my imagination. And I write this scene about a girl having sex with a gear shift in a car, and she tells me it's not possible. So the week of Valentine's Day, 1989, we're getting closer and closer, and she comes in, and we're going to have sex. It's going to be my first time. But she doesn't know that, because I talk like I've had sex with lots of women. And even though I'm an atheist, I think I'm a really disciplined person and a really good person, and very rational, and my ethics comes from my reason. And so I slide on the condom, I get on top of her, and I try to stick it inside of her, and it doesn't work. It doesn't go in. It's like my life is so frustrating. I'm ill, I'm weak, I can't accomplish anything, and I can't even get my cock inside this girl who's willing. And so I go to my drawer and I get out Vaseline, and I smear it all over, my condom-clad member. And I know that the Vaseline can cause the condom to tear, and I know that that could expose me to STDs and to getting her pregnant. And I don't care because I'm so desperate to get inside of her. So like my reason and my ethics are like very, very weak. Still doesn't work. I still can't get it inside. she's like dry. Like the more I try, the drier, the more shriveled up she gets. So finally she says, you lie down. And then she gets on top of me, and she like kind of takes me with her hand and kind of guides me inside of her. It's like, yes! Yes, my penis is finally inside a woman. And I hug her and we laugh and we talk for like 20 minutes, and then she goes like this. And I guess she said, hurry up and finish. So I finish, and it's like magnificent. I have this orgasm inside of a woman. Condom didn't break. And I have a phobia about germs and stuff, so as soon as we finish, I'm dashing out the door for the bathroom. I need to wash off. And all these guys are outside, and they're all high-fiving me, because I guess they were listening to everything that was going on. So I have regular sex with this girl, and suddenly all these emotions come up. I'd always denied emotions, because I was like my dad. I was like, tried to be, without need, tried to be a martyr, tried not to have any emotions. But now all this, jealousy would come up when she, talks to other guys, or I saw her dancing with her ex, and I got really jealous. And made me realize that my reason and my ethics was not enough, because I could not control, the waves of emotion that I had as I got into this sexual, romantic, passionate relationship with her. And I had the dread. I couldn't imagine going my whole life with her. She was just the best I could do at the time. And so I would spread out the porn magazines just past the pillow. And so when I was having sex with her, I'd be looking at the magazines.
No way.
Because the girls in the magazines had really big breasts. And that's what I wanted. But it made me kind of feel sick afterwards, and she wasn't terribly impressed by that approach either. I thought that'd be the best of both worlds. I was monogamous, but I could still have my fantasies, but I don't recommend that. So what I did instead is when I was having sex with her, I was thinking about the Korean. But I didn't tell her that. While I'm at UCLA, I encountered this Jewish theologian and radio talk show host on KABC Radio named Dennis Prager. And he'd written this introductory book to Judaism. And so when I had to drop out of university, went home, I was so sick that I had my parents read this book to me. And I probably wanted to stick the knife in, they read me this book on Judaism. And there's a chapter in there comparing Christianity to Judaism, and Judaism comes off much better in Dennis Prager's book. And I have my parents read that to me. I got a great kick out of that. And I decided I'm going to become a Jew. Not only that, I'm going to become more holy than Dennis Prager. Because Dennis Prager is a really moderate guy. He doesn't think pornography or premarital sex are the worst things in the world. He doesn't think they're good, but on the scale of sins, they're not so terrible. But I said, no, I'm going to be really righteous. So now when my Chinese girlfriend comes up, I don't have sex with her. We're just lying in bed, and she's on top of me, and we're grinding away. But now I am going to be holier than Dennis Prager. I gave up masturbation for 15 months, 1990 to 1991. I go down under my house in the asbestos lining. I pull out all my Penthouse magazines. I put them in a pile, and I burn them up. It's not good for the environment. This really dark, acrid smoke is coming up. And as the smoke rises up to the sky, I kind of see my evil lust just kind of disappearing, because I am all about God now. And I become so holy that I take on the Orthodox Jewish practice. I won't even shake hands with women. I meet this 80-year-old Holocaust survivor woman. I refuse to shake hands with her. As the years go by and I'm living at home, I realize I'm never going to get well as long as I'm living at home, but I'm too weak to live elsewhere. I'm convinced there are answers out in the wider world for me. And I also know that about 1% of women find me mesmerizing. So if I just got to try to connect with a lot of women, and then I'll find that one. So I start placing singles ads and answering singles ads, and this tiny trickle of women come up to visit me. And eventually I meet a woman who's got E-cup breasts. I mean, this is amazing. She's like 20 years old, and she volunteers for NASA, and she's got E-cup breasts, and she's only 5 foot tall. Like, imagine a 5 foot tall girl now with a rack like that. So I remember picking her up at the bus stop and driving her home and asking her to tell me about all the different times she'd been raped. And this was a very rapeable girl. I mean, she'd been raped by everyone, it seemed like. And but she said if I tried to rape her, she would scream. So she said, do you want me to just like turn around and go home? I go, no. So we go to bed, our separate rooms, and I get up in the morning, and I grab some paper towels and a condom. I really like cleanliness. I really like to be able to wipe off afterwards very quickly without all those icky fluids getting on me for too long. And I like slide into bed and just start massaging her and say, well, how does that feel? And she says, I wish it was your cock. It's like, yes! So away I go, I like dive right in, I make sure I'm in there before I like finally pull her t-shirt off, and like there they are. It's like there they are, they're mine. Like finally, I am now. This is 1993. I was born in 1966, so I'm now 27 years old, and I finally have a pair of E-cup breasts, and it's fantastic. And afterward, we go out to the kitchen and got the paper towels to clean up. I make her breakfast, and she turns away from me, and she said, Luke, what color are my eyes? And I said, green. She said, no, they're brown. So she would come up regularly on weekends. Even though I had the chronic fatigue syndrome, still I was able to give it to her 3 times a day. And she got tired of, like, fighting me. She just, like, it was fine now. And I wouldn't call her my girlfriend. And I was still like really into God-based ethics and Judaism. You know, I had a bit of a sex problem, but I was still very much into God. And so I wanted to be ethical. I said, if I'm ever with anyone else, I'll tell you. And so the whole time this is going on, I'm talking on the phone every day with this woman in Orlando, Florida, who is much more beautiful than Diana, but 11 years older than me. More intelligent than Diana, more accomplished than Diana, but much sicker than Diana. She has, I'll call her Pam. Pam has her own health problems. Eventually Pam comes out, after Diana spent the weekend with me, Pam flies out, comes in on a Monday. I'm like badgering her for sex. And finally she takes a Klonopin and says, okay. And like we're off to the races. It's like 3 times a day. Pam, and it's great because she's had a hysterectomy, so I don't have to wear a condom. Like it's fantastic. This is the first, I'm having regular sex 3 times a day without a condom with Pam. It's like it's going to be great. And Pam seems very capable, so I think she'll help me. And Diane had given me a book called The Givers and the Takers, and I called Diana. I say, hey, I'm with Pam now, this girl I've been corresponding with, and I told you if I ever had sex with anyone else, I'd tell you. Like, Diana's absolutely sick, absolutely wrecked on the phone, and she says, well, she calls me back a few hours later and says, Dennis Prager just called me, because I'd written a letter complaining to him that, you're just using me and you never take me out. So he called me, gave me some movies we should go see, and I got to tell him what you're really like. And I got to tell his whole office staff. I called them and told them what you're really like. Pam gets like honeymoon disease. Can't have sex anymore. Like totally sucks. Like I even have to drive her to the hospital. And then a few days later, my dad catches us in the shower, and my parents are wrecked because they're traditional Christians. And sexual sins are the very worst sins. So they write me out of the will. They had set up this special will to take care of me because I was chronically ill and I wasn't having sex. And so I flee to Orlando with Pam, and the relationship just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And finally, she goes off and has sex with someone else just to get rid of me because I'm highly insecure, very jealous. like show up in shul on Shabbos at synagogue, and I'm just like crying. And this very eccentric, weird people kind of take me in, and I move in with them, and start pluking everything that moves. And I finally meet Dennis Prager, and he says, if you come to Los Angeles, I might have work for you. So I moved to Los Angeles. But he's able to pick up pretty quick, and his staff's able to pick up pretty quick. There's something like not right with me. Like, even though I'm all about God-based ethics and Judaism, something like a little off with me. And so I never get the job. But I do get the Korea. One day she comes over, and we've been exchanging a letter or two a year the past 5-6 years, much of it about God and religion and morality. She comes over, and we're sitting. I got a friend's apartment in Westwood all to myself, and we're sitting out in the sun on the 4th floor, 923 Levering, and I start talking about sex, and she leans over and kisses me. I kiss her back, and I take her inside, and I undress, and finally those D-cup breasts of mine, and she mentioned she's a virgin, which makes it all the more exciting to me. And just like lay her out on the bed. It's like this wonderful buffet, ready for me to partake. And just so excited. She's not as hot. She was 6 years ago when I first met her. So she's now 24 instead of 18. But she's still my fantasy girl. I've been like fantasizing about this girl for 6 years, and now she's finally mine. She's naked. I clamber on top of her. And it's the worst sex of my life. I have a hell of a time getting inside of her. It's just horrible. And we keep doing it over the next few days, and it doesn't get any better. And I'm just appalled because I've never had bad sex. And this is awful. And I take my satisfaction anyway, but I could see the look on her face. It's doing nothing for her. And so I tell her, look, you'll have other lovers. It will get better as you go along. So one day, the Chinese girl, the one who took my virginity, calls me up, and she says she found some potatoes on sale, and she bought me a bag. So she comes over with this bag of potatoes, and she's very amenable, very friendly, very open and welcoming, and I get her into bed. And I realized how good it was having sex with her. It was just so good. It was so easy and great, and she just really brings me to a massive climax, and it was just wonderful. We're lying back on the bed afterwards, and she says, how many women have you been with since me? And I say, 10. And she says, they taught you well, because you used to be really awkward. And I say, how many guys have you been with since me? And she says, 1. So now I'm off to the races. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm like jumping on everything that moves. I'm placing singles ads. I meet this girl who says she looks like, it was a big actress from 15 years ago, but with small breasts. She looks like this actress, but with bigger breasts. Julia
Roberts?
Julia Roberts. She says she looks like Julia Roberts, but with bigger breasts. She's a movie editor. So she picks me up, takes me to sushi, we talk. First night out, we go for a drive out to Malibu. It's night. We walk out onto the rocks beside the ocean, and we start making out. She's stacked. And she says, okay, nothing below the waist. So off goes the shirt. Like these magnificent breasts. And I'm just like sitting there on the rocks, suckling on her breasts. And she's just kind of cradling my head. And it's just like the most beautiful thing in the world. And so for the second date, she takes me to the Holocaust Park. She's not Jewish, but she knows I'm into Judaism and God. So Pan Pacific Park, there's like this special Holocaust bit, and I try to have sex with her up against the Holocaust signs. Like, what better way to say Am Yisrael Chai, the people Israel live. I wanted to give it to Hitler right there. With this beautiful movie editor with looks like Julia Roberts, but with bigger breasts. But she thinks that's inappropriate. So we go back to my place, and for the first time, she takes off all her clothes. I got this beautiful young woman, spread out before me on the floor, and I get on top of her, and I just got lost in there. I just got lost. Like no, I'm not Ron Jeremy. And it was like this beautiful girl that I was just dying to have, and I just couldn't get any friction, and I was just lost. Like I was lost in this Grand Canyon. I'd never experienced anything like it. It was just totally bewildering to me. And like I started shriveling up, and I managed to eke out a nut, and I know it's done nothing for her. So I used my hands to get her off, and like she's really loving and grateful and like really sweet. And she drives off. And a couple of days later, she sends me this letter about how much our time together is meaning to her and how much she adores me. And I don't know why I didn't call her back. I was just so thrown by feeling so small. Like my first girlfriend, the Chinese girl, she could make a toothpick feel like a cigar. But the Julia Roberts girl, she made a cigar feel like a toothpick. And I was thrown, and I didn't talk to her about it. I just started flicking other women that I met. Met a woman through a singles ad, and she flew me to New York. She was like an heiress. I didn't have any money, so I stayed with her for 3 weeks on the Upper West Side, like 77th and Broadway. She gave me spending money every day. And she took me to shows and took me to movies and took me around New York. But on the first day, she was very bossy. So I decided this is not the woman for me. And again, she's a little older. She's like 6 years older, so this is not going to last a long time. And so she's too bossy, and even though we're having sex every night, and I figure, hey, I'm in New York, let me play some singles ads. So she finds my ads in the Village Voice and calls the number and has my voice.
God.
Oh boy, do we have some explaining. There's a lot of tension the last few days of my, because I'm stuck there for 3 weeks, and there's some tension the last few days. And our final night together, we decided to kind of try to dissipate the tension by renting a movie. So we go to the video store, and she rents Sleepless in Seattle, and she says, I can rent something, so I rent I Like to Watch, which is this great porn film. There's this amazing scene with little Oral Annie, right at the beginning, and there's just some really hot chicks. And so I decided we should watch the porn film rather than Sleepless in Seattle. Let's start off with the porn film. And so I kind of situate her so I can watch the porn film while I'm having sex with her. And then when I leave my wallet behind. And she goes through it and finds an address of some woman I met. So there's a little bit of tension, and she does send the wallet back. I get on the phone with her, and she says, well, my therapist says you're using me. So that was pretty much it. I move in with this other woman for a few weeks, and eventually she says, my therapist says you're using me. My parents don't like you. My friends don't like you. And I say, okay, can I borrow $500? Because I was having car trouble. When I was driving here tonight, my van broke down, 2 miles away, before my play, before this huge packed crowd. My van breaks down, so my cars were breaking down then, and I don't have a girlfriend now to borrow money from, so don't know why I don't have a girlfriend. So eventually I find my niche writing on the porn industry. And I achieve some very lofty heights. I am Hustler Magazine's Asshole of the Month, because they think I'm bringing down the standard that they set for good porn journalism. Hustler Magazine says I'm an irresponsible porn journalist. And I thought that was kind of cool. And my family's getting concerned because people are asking them, hey, is Luke Ford... Your Luke Ford, is he the porn king? And I have to admit that I am. I published my first book, my magnum opus, A History of X, 100 Years of Sex in Film. And my family makes me an offer. They will fly me back to Australia for a month. I'll pay for it all if I'll consult with the doctors of their choice. So I said yes. I am so willing to go along with things where other people pay. And the psychiatrist that I saw for 3 hours came back to my family with the following diagnosis. Applying the DSM-4, Luke has a personality disorder of the histrionic narcissistic type. Luke is very dependent upon other people for his identity as a person. He has poor identity integration and poor self-esteem. Accordingly, Luke is always looking for mirroring. It's called narcissistic supply. That is to say, Luke is always looking for external validation of himself as a person. He needs other people to tell him who he is. However, because it is not possible for people to mirror him all the time, he gets disappointed, and this can turn to envy. Luke may not be conscious of the fact that he is very envious of his family, as they seem to have things he would like to have, but does not have. This leads to him fluctuating between, on the one hand, devaluing people such as his family, putting them down, on the other hand, idealization of people such as Dennis Prager. Luke tends to make unreasonable demands on people who are eventually driven to setting limits on him. Luke takes this very badly. Luke needs 5 to 10 years of insight orientation psychotherapy. It was the falling out with Dennis Prager which caused him to go to therapy. While Luke has a lot of therapy speak, he may not really understand the concepts involved. Luke will continue to do what he is doing to satisfy his needs until such times as the rewards are outweighed by the negative effects of the same. Then he may do something about getting his life on track. The negative effects of his current behavior that no one will have a long-term relationship with him, as no matter how sane people are, they cannot live without getting something back, and Luke is always taking without giving anything back. Second, any decent woman who looked at his website would be immediately repulsed. Luke is capable of being exploitive. His rules are situational, and he justifies things. Luke has no sense of self, therefore he's very changeable in different circumstances. So I finally hit bottom in September of 2008 when I get ejected from my 5th synagogue. And I'd been at this one, B'nai David Judea, for about 7 years. The rabbi had really put his neck on the line, helped me try to get my life sorted out. I quit writing on the porn industry. I was making progress to finish my formal Orthodox conversion after getting kicked out of many different Orthodox conversion programs. But my rabbi could not abide the needless cruelty on my website, even though I wasn't writing about porn anymore. My rage would just come out, and I'd just go after people. And he gave me a choice. He said, you can either find a new synagogue, or I'll be your editor of your website. I'll determine what goes on it. You have to close down your present website, start a new one, and I or someone I appoint will be the editor of it. So I'm devastated by this, because whenever I'm ejected from a synagogue, or I get fired from a job, or I lose a relationship, it always feels the same. It's just like this overwhelming loss. For some reason, it just triggers the trauma of those first few years where I kept getting shipped from family to family to family. So my dad couldn't look after me and his dying wife, so I had to get shipped out. And so I was absolutely devastated by this, because I thought I'd finally found a home. I'd been here for 7 years. The rabbi had really worked with me, put a lot of time into me, trying to help me. Stuck his neck out for me. All the other rabbis in the community told him, you should just eject him. He's no good. So I go to therapy. Go back to therapy. And about 2.5 years in, I'm telling my therapist about my sexual fantasies. I really love those stories about naughty teachers. I love that. That to me is the greatest fantasy. I never got to have sex with any of my teachers. And I think that would just be amazing. I particularly love it when, a teacher will have sex with, a 12-year-old boy. Because, when I was 12, there's nothing I would have rather had than sex with my teacher. And so I list off these fantasies, and my therapist says, that sounds like eroticized rage. And as soon as I heard the term, before he even explained it, I knew it applied to me. I knew I had all this anger underneath my sexuality. He said that eroticized rage usually a reaction to the mother figure, that take a boy who has to become the man of the house because his father's gone much of the time. The mother will turn to him because the father's gone, kind of give him more than he can handle, tell him more things than he can handle. Women become frightening to him, and he becomes enraged. and I saw how I had this like mile-wide hatred of women that was just like poisoning my whole life. And it would even come into like ordinary everyday interactions. I wasn't going out raping women. I was using them, but I wasn't raping them. But like my sense of humor is just so cruel. The jokes I would tell were just so cruel. And I saw that it was poisoning all of my life. And so I went home, Googled the term eroticized rage, and I saw that it was a symptom of sex addiction. And I thought, I need to get some help. So I started 12-stepping for sex addiction. There are about 8 different 12-step groups for sex addiction. And I found one where they don't impose any limits on you. Like many of them say, this is a commitment to no masturbation, no pornography, no premarital sex. Others are, we want you to do this work and set your own boundaries for the behavior you no longer want to do. So I quit the porn, and after I was in the program for about 15 months, I was asked to speak one day. I thought, wow, if I'm being asked to speak about recovering from sex addiction, I better really up my game. And so I decided I'm going to give up masturbation. So since June 10th of 2012, I've been free of masturbation, not that I'm counting. And I remember sitting in Starbucks one day with the book from my program, and I'm working the 4th step. And the 4th step means taking a complete and thorough moral inventory. And there's a sentence in there that says, we addicts have used everybody and everything in our lives to try to meet our addictive emotional needs. Whoa. It's like a punch to the face. So yeah, there's something to that. There's really something to do that. So I started making a list, as the 4th step requires, of a resentment list. Everybody I had resentment against. Starting with my father and my mother, and the synagogues that had kicked me out, and the rabbis that had shunned me, and people who had humiliated me, and the women who manipulated me or let me down or wouldn't let me have sex with them. And I had this long resentment list. And then in the next column you write out what did they do that causes me to resent them. So I wrote out what they did. And then there's another column, what part of my life did it affect? Did it affect my self-esteem, my social standing, my pocketbook? Where are the threats to my life that caused my resentment? Next column is what role did I play? And in some of the instances I didn't play any role, but in a lot of the instances I played a big role. I stepped on other people's toes trying to get what I wanted. I'd used and exploited people. And then where it wasn't my fault, I had to learn to just give that up to God, that other people were acting out of their own spiritual sickness, just as I've been acting out of my own sickness for years, using and abusing people. And just as I want people to be understanding and compassionate towards me, I need to extend that same understanding and compassion towards others. And I was able to let go of most of my resentment, but some of the resentment, such as towards my father, towards my mother, stuff that I'm still battling with, it didn't go away. And so then the program says you have to pray for the person. You have to pray that they get all the things that you want for your life. So I want inner peace, so I pray for my father to find some inner peace. I want to have meaningful connections with other people. I want my father to bond with other people. I want to learn to notice what I'm feeling and to be able to express it, to be able to seek support and to connect with other people. And so I start praying every day for my father that he experiences the same connection that I'm seeking. And I'm finding that little by little I'm starting to let go of more and more of my resentments so that I'm no longer going around through my life stepping on toes. Instead, I'm going through my life asking myself these days 2 main questions. Like, how free from my addictions do I want to be? And how real do I want God to be in my life? Thank you. Thanks, guys, for showing up.
Hey, man. Thanks for your hard work.
Thanks, man.